Giacomo, good to see you again. Welcome back to Popternative.
Thank you so much for having me, man.
Season two's interests me because everyone's on the equal playing field for season one, right? The viewers and the people working on it, because you've never played these characters before. We've never seen these characters. There's a lot that can happen in season two. What is that mindset for a season two? Are you familiar? Are you starting to learn more? Like, what's that like for you specifically?
I think season two is really exciting for a show because season one has so much heavy lifting to do. It has to introduce you to a world, it has to introduce you to characters, it has to introduce you to themes and stories that they want to tell, their perspective. It's a lot of heavy lifting that they have to do. They have to set up objectives and then show the audience all the obstacles they're going to put in the way of those objectives for the characters. So it's tough. Like a pilot is tough even for that, right? It's like you don't know
Yep.
any of these people, what they care about, and we have to tell you all of this stuff. So season two is so great because we've done all that. We've done all
Yep.
the explaining. You've watched an entire season of these characters. You know what their beliefs, wants, and hopes and dreams are. You know a little bit of their dark pasts. And so season two, we can really start digging into our characters more and more satisfying relationships and having a lot of our dialogue be more character centered instead of exposition explaining things and stuff
Yep.
like that. I think we've really found ourselves in season two in terms of what our show really wants to be. We were so happy that it was so well received by the fans last year, and that they enjoyed both our case of the week and getting to solve a case with the heroes every week that are fun and interesting and wacky and weird. I think our fans really connected to the fact that our show is made by people who love movies and TV, and so seeing these TV shows and movies in our episodes.
Yep.
So it's fun. Our first one is sort of Fast and the Furious this season. So we have a street gang that are street racers. So we kind of go undercover there. And there's a lot of Fast and Furious franchise references and catch lines and things like that for the viewers that love that franchise to kind of get involved in, a little Easter eggs. Our second episode is like a Yellowstone one where we're on a ranch and a family fighting over land and stuff like that. So there's just fun little worlds that we get to dip into, which makes each episode quite different, as opposed to sort of just being on the same New York street corner with a dead body. And it sort of feels like a lot of these procedurals that they just sort of feel very similar every episode.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that about, every episode kind of has like procedural, like there's a different case, different characters, and then we might not see those characters again, and then other
Yeah.
characters come in. But what I find is really cool about wild cards is there's kind of elements with characters that stay throughout a whole season as well. So I'm just wondering from an actor perspective, what's that like? Is that like a ping pong match with the procedural week by week, but also with the elements that kind of stay throughout a season? Like, do you think about that? Because I find that really fascinating too, that balance.
Yeah, I mean, I think this season for my character is very much about getting resolution for my murdered brother, which we
Yeah.
set up in the first season, right? We find out that my character's brother was murdered, and it's unresolved, and it's like sort of the heart and soul of all his pain and his days. It's all he thinks about. And so this season, we're really focusing on getting closure on that by the end of the
Mhm.
season and finding who did that and all that kind of stuff and getting some closure on that. So that's sort of my main A storyline in the season. Whenever we're not solving cases, he's working on that, and by the end of it, we have a very satisfying conclusion to that.
What's that first day back on set for season two? Not even like the table reads or the conversations, because is it like, does it feel just like you picked off where you left off? Does it feel like there was a break? Like, what's that like, that first day on set for season two?
I think the first week is just it's intense. It's a big change of pace. You go from kind of relaxing and having free time to 18 hours a day on set, no free time, no social life, no balance. So you're just work, 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 work. So it's quite a dramatic change in pace. But it was great to see Vanessa Morgan, my co-star, and all the other castmates of mine, my producers and writers that I work with, who I love. And so, yeah, I go to work every day with the most amazing people, which just makes it all worthwhile. So it was a tough adjustment, of course, but so happy to see all the lovely people I work with that make this show.
You kind of teased a little bit about each season. There's kind of little Easter eggs for films. Really cool thing. There's gonna be some cool guest stars this season as well. Cool guest stars in season one, like Ashley Green.
Yep.
Some cool
Yeah.
ones this season. Martin Sheen's, NXT superstar Tony D'Angelo. When do you find out about the guest stars? Is it like do you find out about, do you read the table, like the scripts, and then like these are the characters, then you find out who's, but like when does the cast find out about the guest stars?
It's usually at the table reads.
Okay.
Usually at the table reads, we either get them there live in person, or if they can't make it, they're over Zoom.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
that's the first time we're meeting the actors. And usually by that time, maybe not like everyone is cast, but the larger roles
Yeah.
are. And then we might have some smaller roles that aren't quite cast that still need to kind of file in. But the large, big guest stars are usually cast by the time we're at a table read. So we get to see them for the first time, and that's always really exciting.
It was really cool because that was something that really stood out for me for season one. Like, there were some really cool guest stars in season one of Wild Cards, and there's some really cool guest stars in season two. Like, it's awesome.
Yeah, I think we're just upping the ante this year, and Martin Sheen plays an incredibly cool character and does some really amazing work for us in this season, and he's sort of trickled throughout the season. Where my storyline is very much about solving my brother's case, Vanessa Morgan's character's storyline in this whole season is about going back to her con roots, and Martin Sheen sort of plays the grandfather of con and the guy who really wrote the book on it. And so she's going back and studying these videos of him talking, where he talks about being a con man and what it takes and all the tricks of the trade and all that kind of stuff, and sort of reacquainting herself with that world, because her father, Jason Priestley, thinks she's gone soft. She's been working with this cop too much and she's going straight. So now she needs to get back to being like, no, don't forget you're a criminal.
Yeah, no, it's
So,
and, I'm a big pro wrestling fan, man. So like, I was excited about Tony D'Angelo.
yeah, I can tell.
So no, that's gonna be really exciting. I find it interesting because you look at, your time on Grey's Anatomy, and you also recently had a project that was on Netflix, like an Italian project as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
I'm just wondering, because we talked about this a little bit last time, but I'm wondering if, like, with something like Wild Cards, where it's very kind of like it's its own thing, like it is what, like it's this like procedural that has the drama, has the genre, has some funny moments at times, right? But you look at other things you worked on where it's very kind of like not as genre bending as Wild Cards. Are you able to bring things from those projects, mindset or preparation, to something like Wild Cards, or are they completely separate based on like what I said?
I think a lot of the work that I've done in the past has been more kind of grounded, more dramatic work.
Yes.
And I think that's the kind of stuff that I grew up doing. And I did a lot of theater for many years before I worked in television. That was a lot of the roles that I was doing. So that's sort of what I'm built for.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I wanted to do Wild Cards is because it was a sort of lighthearted procedural that was very comedy focused.
Yes.
Very much about getting laughs. And I hadn't done a lot of things like that. And I thought that would be a really great opportunity to kind of dip my toe into that and just have fun making people laugh and doing something that, when you finish watching our show, you're not like depressed, that you feel like, oh, good, I can like go out in the world. It's going to be okay. You know what I mean? That's sort of like what our show says. Now, that being said, I'm very lucky and fortunate because there are other shows like ours that sort of stay in that gear, and they don't dare venture out from that at all.
Yep.
They really stay in that comedy, lighthearted, silly, whereas Wild Cards allows itself periodically to actually get quite grounded and tell some dramatic stories. And so I appreciate that. And I think the audience is going to appreciate that too. So I guess to answer your question, there are some moments that require more grounded, more dramatic work. And those are the things that I pull from and play from. And I'm happy to bring that into this Wild Card. So I can do the funny and have these like fun antics that are very sort of like the straight man, the dry man, the Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones, grunting and groaning and rolling his eyes at whatever silly things Max is doing. But then there's some other scenes where there is some really nice dramatic stuff that it's not funny anymore.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting to me that you bring that up, Giacomo, because I'm also like a creative and a filmmaker myself. And you brought up the fact that you wanted to do this project because it was maybe it was something that you haven't done a lot before. It was a bit different and new to you from a storytelling perspective. So I'm just curious then, based on that, and then even if it wasn't, even if you went from one drama to another, whether you've been in a set one time or thousands of times, you're always going to learn something new from an acting storytelling perspective.
Of course.
What were some learning experiences for you specifically on Wild Cards that maybe you weren't kind of familiar with before with prior projects that you'll take for future projects specifically? Because that interests me.
I think the pace in which we work is very fast.
Yep.
We have, the amount of pages we shoot in a day I think I tend to typically like a little bit more preparation time that I'm not afforded on this show because of our scale and how quickly we need to work. But there's something to be said about training that muscle in that way that, like, you know, and I spoke to writers on the show as well, of like, when you don't have the time to overthink every little decision that you make, sometimes you have to rely completely on your instincts.
Yeah.
And you'd be shocked sometimes to find out how good your instincts are.
Yep.
And sometimes when you're left with too much time to think about something, the art you make is actually shit.
Yeah.
Because you spent too much time thinking about it instead of just going with that instinctual gut feeling that led you to tell that story in the first place. So although there's moments where I'd like a little bit more time to prepare and rehearse, whatever, it is true that, you know, working in that way where you're just kind of shooting from the hip, sometimes you get some really good gold out of that stuff where you're not in your head, you're really in your body and you're just going for it.
I also find too, from my experiences, a lot of really cool things that happen, especially in like indie filmmaking, happen like they're not really as planned. Like they happen super last minute. And it's your like favorite thing of the film you make is something that wasn't even planned 2 days until 2 days before you go to camera. Like that's crazy to me too.
Sort of happy accidents.
Reminded me of that too a little bit too.
Yeah.
Which is so fascinating. But yeah, I can't wait for people to see new episodes in the new season of Wild Cards on CBC in Canada and eventually also in the States. They're going to be able to watch it on the CW, which is really, really cool. Giacomo, it's so great catching up with you. Thank you so much for coming back on the show, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I love your passion about our show. It's so great to talk to you.
Absolutely. Your Instagram account is just your name, right? If people want to keep updated with everything.
Yep. If they can figure out how to spell it, then which is complicated, but Google will help you spell my name.
Awesome.
And then that's my Instagram handle.
YouTube.com/PopTurner episodes. Till next time, this is Giacomo, who you can catch in season 2 of Wild Cards on CBC and on the CW. And PD Beats signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.